I'm Robin Engel from the University of Cincinnati, and I'm here also representing Lieutenant Colonel Whalen, James Whalen from the Cincinnati Police Department, and my colleague from Scotland, William Graham, who's former inspector with the Strideclath Police Department and now with Glasgow Caledonian University. I'm here to tell you about a tale of two cities. Cincinnati, Ohio took a risk in 2007. We had an increasing crime rate. Violence was predominant in our city. We had a 400% increase in homicides over a 6-year period. Despite the national declines in violence across the United States and the UK, some cities, and in particular geographic areas and among specific groups of people, violence remains a persistent problem. And this was true in our city. The same was also true in Glasgow, where they had a rising crime and violence problem. But as you see on the slide behind me, these cities are very different. Cincinnati, a population of approximately 300,000, although our larger metropolitan area is about 2 million. Glasgow, about 600,000 in the city proper, also about 2 million in the city proper. Cincinnati, Ohio, however, is a black-white city versus Glasgow is a predominantly white city. The violence problem in Cincinnati was shootings committed by and against low-income black males, typically involved in groups and gangs in their mid-20s and linked directly to drug markets in many cases. In Glasgow, however, the violence problem was knifings committed by and against low-income white males, typically in gangs, generally in their mid-teens, so they were a younger population and often alcohol-related. The interesting part about my story is that the same core principles of a violence reduction strategy had significant reductions in violence in both of these cities, despite their differences. The initiative that I'm talking about is CIRV, the Cincinnati Initiative to Reduce Violence, borrowed by our Glasgow colleagues and now called the Community Initiative to Reduce Violence. Apparently we are a franchise. What it is a focused deterrence approach that reduces group and gang violence. And we do this while strengthening the relationship between law enforcement and communities, helping offenders, addressing racial conflict, and also reducing incarceration over time. The idea is to partner community service providers and law enforcement officials to send key messages of nonviolence to the target population. These types of initiatives have been tried across the country. Many cities are using focused deterrence approach with significant success. The core principles of a focused deterrence initiative: first, active chronic offenders commit a majority of the violence. We know this to be true through so many criminological studies at this point. We also know that offenders are loosely organized in groups and gangs. The days of the structured intergenerational hierarchical, color-wearing gangs are limited. And the cities that we work in across the country now are experiencing more of this loose-knit affiliation with individuals who hang out together on the street, they went to school together, they dropped out of school together, and now they're committing violence together. And what we also know is that the violence is often based on disrespect, norms and narratives of the street, what it means to be a man, how you respond to respect. You danced with my girl, you stepped on my foot, you touched my car. Often those types of things can lead directly to violence. But this violence can be impacted directly through group pressure and support. Law enforcement that focus on group intervention, social services that provide a way out, and community members that will stand up and say, it's not acceptable in our communities. In order to do this, we must have sustained communication with offenders. This was a novel concept when we tried this in 2007 in the city of Cincinnati, where law enforcement officials, social service providers, and community members stand together as one and deliver key messages in a sustained communication with our target offenders. This slide is actually the slide that really grabs a lot of folks' attention because it directs people to understand that a very small percentage of our population, less than half of 1% of the population in Cincinnati, were involved in groups and gangs, and yet these individuals were involved in nearly 3/4 of our homicide, focusing very specifically and targetedly with surgical precision on these individuals and in the neighborhoods and the communities and the street segments where they operate is very, very important. We use social network analysis to track the very fluid nature of these gangs. This slide represents the gangs in our city in 2007. A green line in between them represents that they are aligned in some way. A red line indicates that they feud. And a blue line indicates that they're a volatile relationship, possibly a past feud, but now aligned in some way. And what you'll see here is that this changes so quickly over time, and the need to really understand the fluid dynamics of the street in order to have an impact in violence. We also put together a very structured organization for our collaborative effort. What we found was that many times these efforts fail because they don't seem organized, and so we worked with executives from Procter & Gamble, and they put together for us an organizational structure focused on objectives, goals, strategies, and measures. We have balanced scorecards, and all of the corporate principles that make corporations run successfully now make our initiative run successfully. We have an enforcement team, a social services team, a community team, and a systems team. Each of these teams have different goals that contribute to a larger strategy implementation team, and finally we're overseen by a governing board. This organizational structure had significant impact throughout the years, as we are one of the longest ongoing focused deterrence initiatives in the country right now, entering our 6th year of operation. What type of impact have we had? In Cincinnati, one of our first evaluations, we looked at a 42-month pre-post. We had a 41% reduction in group and gang member involved homicides and a 22% reduction in non-fatal shootings. No significant impact on non-group or gang member involved homicides, and this suggests that this result is not simply due to chance or a pre-existing condition that's affecting all violence, but rather very targeted on our group and gang members. And there is a growing body of evidence that suggests that this is true in other cities across the country. But what about Glasgow? They also did this initiative. 400 youths involved in their initiative over a 3-year period. Significant reductions, 52% reduction in violent crime and an 82% reduction in weapon offenses, using the same core principles. Although I caution you, because you can't just take these initiatives off the shelf and plug them into a different place. And my colleague William Graham will tell you about the need for really understanding policy transfer and how you can take these core ideas and put them into different structures. So in conclusion, I want to leave you with a few core ideas. First, focused deterrence approaches can significantly reduce violence. We have seen this again and again in study after study. The core principles of focused deterrence apply across cultures, across racial groups, age groups, and types of violence. That's what our colleagues in the United Kingdom have been able to demonstrate by taking this initiative, and through policy transfer have been able to implement successfully. We have to understand, though, how that effective policy transfer operates to suit local needs so that we can better understand how to tailor these initiatives. And then finally, we need to continue looking for additional funding opportunities for our local communities and our researchers. Understanding these mechanisms and putting them into place so that we can continue to reduce violence across the country and around the world is our task today. Thank you so much.